There is a specific kind of pressure we put on men that rarely gets named out loud. It gets categorized as duty or just basic expectation, but underneath that, there is this relentless demand to simply make a way, to figure it out.
It is entirely consuming. And I think people miss that part, the consumption of the mind. You look at a man who has a family, who has people relying on him, and his brain is just running constantly, trying to map out survival. Not even just survival, but purpose. And we act like that is just the default setting. Like he is just supposed to have this drive to be something, to build something. And we don't give any credit to the sheer weight of that.
We treat it as biology instead of labor.
Exactly. No, wait, not exactly. We treat it as an unwritten contract. Like society handed over this expectation and said, this is what you do. You provide, you build. And obviously, this isn't exclusively a male experience. There are women who operate with this exact same machinery. Women who have had that drive since they were kids, who are completely exempt from the traditional expectations because they are just wired to build. It is how they move. But when you look at the traditional family structure, often you see one parent, usually the mother, able to dedicate the emotional and physical time to the children, while the man is just isolated in this mental space of having to construct the path forward.
That isolation is where the shift happens. It stops being about gender pretty quickly and turns into a division of mindset.
That is the actual root of it. Because you can strip away the male-female dynamic completely, and you are still left with these two distinct ways human brain operates in the world. You have the brain that is consumed with making a way, with building a system. And then you have the brain that looks at the systems that are already built and says, okay, I will just fit into this. I will conform to this because it is already here.
The builder and the conformer.
Right. And we spend so much time trying to pretend everyone has the same capacity or the same desire to build. We don't. Some people are genuinely wired to accept the world as it is handed to them. Their brains do not spin out trying to invent a new way to survive. They just find the most comfortable spot inside the existing machine. And if you are a builder trying to operate alongside someone who just wants to conform, it creates this profound friction.
I'm not sure that friction is just a personality clash, though. Isn't conforming often just a survival mechanism? If you have kids to feed, plugging into the existing system isn't necessarily a lack of drive. It's triage.
I hear that, but I think that is letting the conformist mindset off the hook a little too easily. Because it is not just about taking a job to feed your kids. It is an entirely different relationship to reality. The conformist looks at the system, sees that it works for now, and decides not to look any deeper. They will complain about it. They will say the system is unfair or broken, but they will not do the agonizing work of stepping outside of it. The builder looks at that same system and feels like they are suffocating. They see that participating in it is just strengthening the very thing that is trapping them.
Wait, let's look at that, because stepping outside the system usually means massive instability. If someone chooses the stable, existing system because they want their family to be safe, calling that conformist feels slightly dismissive of what it takes to just survive everyday life.
It is uncomfortable to sit with, I realize that, but the discomfort doesn't make it less true. If you're just doing what works for now, you are trading long-term freedom for short-term convenience. The person who says, as long as we keep doing this, we will be fine, they are missing the fact that every time they plug back into that system, they are making it stronger. They are putting themselves further into a kind of systemic slavery. And more importantly, they are guaranteeing that their children are going to have to deal with an even stronger, more entrenched system later.
So the builder sacrifices the present comfort for the future structure.
They have to. There is no other way. And it requires a level of sacrifice that the conformist simply cannot understand. They literally do not have the framework for it. How do you explain to someone who has been trained by society to just accept what is normal, that normal is actually the trap? You can't. You get people who will perform the idea of wanting something different. They will talk about wanting to be independent or wanting to build something, but they do not have the work ethic. They don't have the stomach for the sacrifice.
The performance of ambition is a lot easier than the reality of building.
It is just talking, because actual building means you have to learn the system you are trying to escape. You can't just ignore it. You have to study it, figure out how it works, and then go through the brutal process of reinventing it, reconstructing it so it works for you on your terms. Those are so many extra exhausting steps. The conformist looks at that and thinks, why are you doing this the hard way? Just clock in. Just do what works. They don't see the slow drain of power.
That drain of power is the historical precedent here. Power isn't usually taken by force anymore. It's taken by offering convenience.
That is the tragedy of it. That is exactly how communities lose their autonomy. It is not always a violent takeover. It is integration. It is taking people who used to have their own ways of living, their own systems, and slowly making things more comfortable for them inside the dominant system. You dismantle independent ways of life by making the alternatives seem too hard. You infiltrate their minds with convenience.
And the people who accept that convenience become complicit.
They become the enforcers of it, which is where I struggle the most. It actually makes me genuinely disgusted when I look at older generations, elders, people who are supposed to be kinfolk, and I see them fully integrated into these systems. The very systems that strip them of their power, they defend them. They push the younger generation to conform to them.
I don't know, that feels too clean to me, judging elders for surviving a system that was historically much more brutal than the one we face now. They didn't always have the luxury of building outside of it. Sometimes integration was the only way they kept their kids alive.
I understand the historical context. I do. But at a certain point, survival becomes complacency. If you've spent your whole life just surviving, and you look at your children and tell them to do the exact same thing instead of helping them build a way out, that is a failure of imagination. It is a failure of responsibility. The people who actually move the needle, the only reason we even have this space to have this conversation is because some people refuse to just be comfortable.
So the tension is between the gratitude for survival and the demand for actual freedom.
Yes, and realizing that expecting a conformist to understand a builder is a waste of time. It causes so much heartache. We spend so much energy trying to convince people to see the invisible chains, to see that participating in the machine is making it worse for the next generation. But you have to accept that some people's brains are just not built for that kind of sight. Once you recognize the kind of people you are dealing with, it saves you an immense amount of time.
You stop asking them to be something they aren't.
You stop handing them the blueprints they cannot read. You just have to do the work yourself, carry that weight, and accept that the sacrifice is the cost of not being owned. It is an incredibly lonely place to be, but it is the only place where anything real actually gets built.
It leaves us looking at the systems we interact with every day and asking what we are actually building by participating in them. There is a weight to that realization that doesn't go away once you see it.
You can't unsee it. You just have to decide if you are willing to carry it.
If this framing of builders and conformists shook something loose for you, send this episode to someone who is carrying that weight right now. The conversation is better when it spreads.